G'day ladies and gentlemen, Scotty D here from the Australis Tabletop Wargaming Network, and welcome into our next installment in our series, From Sprue to Tabletop. Alrighty everyone, so for our next installment in our series, From Sprue to Tabletop, here on the ATW and with myself, we're going to start looking at how you can approach painting your miniatures before we actually jump into working on some of the miniatures we're wanting to work on for the next couple of videos here in the series. And today's video, we're going to be talking about batch painting and everything that's involved when it comes to it. So before we jump in, I want to thank everyone who has been joining us here on the ATW and as of late over on the YouTube side, whether that's also on Twitch as well. Really appreciate you guys checking out the tournament coverage or the hobby streams and hanging out with us during the live streams as well. Really appreciate it, as well as watching our videos here on YouTube. So, batch painting, to sum it up, it's a method of painting that a lot of miniature painters and wargamers regularly utilize to paint their miniatures and armies in a method that's pretty quick and constructed. And we're going to dig into a bit more about it. So, it's a technique that sounds as it is named. Instead of painting each individual model at a time like we did for the Assault Intercessors that we've painted up in this series earlier, you actually work in batches of miniatures at the one time. Now, when you're doing batch painting, you only start on the next batch of miniatures once you've completed the current batch you're working on. In general, that's the rule. It's completely up to you as a hobbyist to determine the size of the batch of miniatures that you're wanting to work on and the approach that you're wanting to take. So then that way you're able to tailor this style of painting to your own best practices that you find work for you as a hobbyist. Now, in my time as a hobbyist in miniature wargaming, not just Lord of the Rings or 40k or Warhammer Fantasy, that's now Warhammer Old World, I've seen two different approaches when it comes to batch painting. There's one primary approach and then a secondary approach that you really don't see all too often that I'm going to talk a bit about as well. And the first style is painting up a small batch of miniatures to completion before moving on to the next small batch of miniatures and doing that over time. However, the one that you see less of is painting a large batch of miniatures with a single color across as many models that have it as possible in that batch and completing that single color before moving on to painting the next color across the entire batch. So that's the lesser seen version, but I have seen people that do prefer painting that way. And we'll talk a bit about each of these approaches in a minute and digging into what they look like and why you might want to work through these methods. So we're going to look at the first method. So starting off with painting in small batches to completion before starting the next small batch. You're wanting to make sure that you've got the right number of miniatures in each batch to allow you to get them painted without feeling as though you're getting bogged down in the painting and demotivated so that you actually stop working on them. There's no point picking up, say, a unit of 20 Necron Warriors and just slogging through it unless you're painting them relatively quickly to actually get through them in a timely manner. Otherwise, if you're painting them with edge highlighting, a lot of detail work, it means that you're going to get bogged down in doing all of those steps across all of the models, and it may take you, say, 3 months in that style, rather than going, okay, if I work at 5 of these at a time, it may take you 3 weeks for just 5, and then you do the next 5 to completion. So then you're actually able to get that sense of accomplishment and sense of achievement. You can see what it looks like when you've got them fully completed as well. Now, the number of miniatures that can be in your small batches can be determined by a number of factors, such as the amount of detail that you're painting on them, the number of miniatures that come in a box set, as well as the minimum number of models that you can take in a particular unit or formation for your game of choice. So say, for example, looking at Lord of the Rings for a second, you can take a hero and 12 warriors in a single kind of formation. So that's kind of the minimum is 13 models there as well. Or if you're taking riders, for example, you've got to paint the horse and the rider, so that can increase it a little bit and such too. So that's something to bear in mind. It just depends on your game of choice when it comes down to that sort of defining factor of your batch size. However, for me personally, when I work on my own miniatures on stream, I actually choose to not work in any more than 5 miniature batches at once. And this means that I can paint less than 5 models due to the amount of that might be in a box sets, or it could be the minimum unit size determining that as well. So I could be painting up less miniatures than the 5 at once as well, or doing because of the number of details on the model and such too. That's another factor I do take into consideration when working in batches. So you could say when I'm working on the following, so if I'm working on, say, some Necron Warriors, I will work on batches of 5. And even though it is less than the minimum unit size, it is still the batch that I would normally work with in terms of the batch size. Or I work with a unit 5 Necron Lich-Guard at a time, which is the number of models that come in the Lich-Guard box set. Or say a unit of 3 Scorpek Destroyers or 3 Primaris Eliminators. That, yes, they have got less than 5 miniatures in the batch. However, they are still the minimum size unit for playing those games with those miniatures in Warhammer 40,000. So this style is going to be quite dependent on how you are wanting to tackle it. Some people want to tackle 10 models at a time that aren't as detailed. That's completely fair. It just really depends on how you're going about it, whether you're using contrast, whether you're doing speed painting methods like slap chop or zenithal base coating to then do your contrast over the top of that, or if you're doing your more traditional opaque acrylic painting as well. Just a lot of factors do go into the size of the batches. So this style does allow you to actually get through your collections of miniatures a bit slower because you're completing each batch over time rather than the second method we're going to be talking about. You will get through batches relatively quickly though, and you'll be able to have completed units as you're working through painting and basing your miniatures over time, and you'll slowly see an army come together. If you're painting up a 2,000 point force from scratch, you'll be able to pick out your units and alternate them and such between, a batch of 5 models and then a character or a vehicle, things like that you can do as well to swap it up, and you'll be able to see the army come together over time. However, if you are wanting to tackle a large batch of models in the one go, there is a couple of tricks to this method that I can see. And so we're going to be talking about that second method we talked at the start. So when you are doing this method, you want to make sure you utilize a color undercoat or a quick method of getting your primary base coat color onto your miniatures by either using a spray cans or by using an airbrush. Now, that is just a easy way to do it. That is generally the quickest way I work on my own Necrons, is I use the Leadbelcher undercoat spray. And so that way I've got the base coat already down before I apply the layer, before we get into the washes and stuff as well. Then when you're picking the next color after your base coat, you want to make sure that you're picking the color that is going to be across the most number of models within the batch so that you're not getting bogged down in them too much. So you want to be able to paint that color on as many as possible, so then you're able to get that color done. And then you want to repeat this process until you get through the majority of the colors that are across a large number of the miniatures. So stuff like gun casings, cables, your metallics, detail work like shoulder pad trims, things like that. You want to do those in batches so you get all of those colors done at the one time, going through the same process on every model. So then when you get to some of the last colors you need to do, it's going to be very dependent on the models that you're needing to work on those. There might be more character size units or character style models, I should say, or they're going to be vehicles that might have a few extra details here and there, with the majority of the army actually being done. Now, if you are wanting to speed up this process a little further, you can choose to actually apply the basing onto your miniatures before undercoating them. If you are using a basing friendly color that you are able to work with pretty straightforward, generally most people would work with black as your undercoat for this, but I've also seen maybe you do uniform gray from Army Painter, you do a gray undercoat instead, is another one that would work nicely with basing, but you don't want to go anything too colored. So if you're not wanting to do colored basing and you've got, say, Khorne Berserkers you're painting Khorne red with a spray can or an airbrush, you don't really want to go through the work of having to do a couple of layers over the basing after having that undercoat go down. So bear that in mind. That's another way that you can speed this side of the process up as well. Now, you can also break this down further if you wanted to include different stages of painting, so that you actually get all your base coats done first, then you work on all the washes across all the models, then you finish up with your edge highlighting, final detail work, that kind of thing. Or you could just do all of one section at once. So you're doing the metal, you're going to do all the base coats, then you can do all your washes, then you're going to do your edge highlights if you're choosing to edge highlight the metal, for example. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. Now, when it comes to this method, if you are a messier base coater, when you are painting models, you're going to need to include a touch-up step or you're going to need to work on doing cleaner base coats so that you don't need to do as many touch-ups, if any at all. So that's one thing you will have to bear in mind when you are doing this method. So the positive of the large batch size is, particularly if you include the basing in there, is you'll be able to have them battle ready relatively quickly if you just do all of the base coats, finish off the basing, and it's battle ready, and then you can continue to work on the washes over time and work on the edge highlights over time once you have them base coated in the color scheme of your choice, pretty much. However, the downside is to this method is that you won't have a fully 100% completed faction to the level that you're wanting to use in your games while doing this method until you actually complete everything across every model within your army in the large batch that you are doing. If you're doing, say, a large force of Lord of the Rings strategy battle game miniatures, for example, that could be, 30, 40 miniatures as well. Just depends on your game system of choice. If you're doing old world, the large batches are generally also probably going to be regiments of stuff too. So that's something else to bear in mind if you are doing the larger batches for old world as well. Now, with these two different styles of badge painting, there is no right choice to go with. It's fully dependent up to how you actually want to go about painting your miniatures, and it's fully under your control. With these two different methods, we're actually going to look at doing both of them, and we're going to look at different styles of miniatures when we're doing them and different techniques as well. So the first style we're going to be looking at is that first method of batch painting in a small batch of models to completion. And so we're going to be actually working on a batch of 5 Necron Warriors. Now, you can also use batch painting techniques, as we kind of alluded to, when you're doing your undercoating as well. When we're doing the undercoating, obviously, I've got 5 Necron Warriors on my spray poles that I'm using, but sometimes if I'm doing a large amount of miniatures, I might have 20 Necron Warriors on there that I'm got on all 4 axes that I am going to be undercoating at the one time across 3 poles. I might have 60, 70 miniatures going at once, get them all undercoated, ready to go, so then I don't have to stress about them. And for this batch, however, I unfortunately actually ran out of my Ledge Belcher undercoat spray that I would normally use to undercoat my Necrons. So to actually get the ball rolling on more of these videos, I've actually just decided to use my Army Painter Uniform Grey undercoat and then actually manually paint a thin coat of Lead Belcher over all 5 Necron Warriors before we actually get started into the normal process of painting my Necron Warriors as well. And we've got that all done as well, which is awesome. So we're ready to go for the next couple of videos working on these Necron Warriors as well, which is going to be great because we're going to be focusing on a lot of metallics, and we're going to be focusing on tinting and small details that you can work on with different metallics, with different coloring in terms of your tinting as well, getting different effects on your miniatures when you're doing metallics and such as well. So it's going to be really good to dig into this side of the hobby. I've really been enjoying painting up my Necrons with this way. I'm excited to show you a lot of what I've learned when it comes to the tinting of metallics and how to actually achieve some great results for your miniatures. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, so that is going to be it for this one. I really appreciate you guys watching our content here on the ATW, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do have any feedback or anything you do want to see in this series going forward, feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you did like the video, make sure to drop a like. And if you want to stay tuned as to the more content we are creating here on the ATW, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell so you're able to be notified as to when we are releasing more content here over the coming months as well. And if you do want to catch us live and see some of the hobbying sessions we do, or the tournament coverage or tournament previews that we do for Australian events, make sure you follow us over at the Australis TWN Twitch channel, and make sure that notification alert is turned on so you're able to be notified as to when the streams start up and such as well. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.